A cookie is a piece of code which is placed onto the web browser of a visitor to your website. That cookie becomes a sort of tracking beacon, and there are broadly two types: first-party cookies, which allow you to track user behavior on your own site, and third-party cookies, which allow other organizations such as Facebook or Google to track user behavior across a range of websites. We'll come back to third-party cookies in a moment. Once someone who has visited your site gets your first-party cookie on their browser, you can track them in a number of ways. You can see when a user returns to your site, how long they spend, and which pages they visit, tracking their path through the site. This information is crucial for analysis, but it can also help your customer if you are able to use the data about their previous visits or current visit to personalize their experience on your site somehow. That experience could become even more personalized if they log in or are logged in automatically when they return. This is significant because up to this point the cookie has allowed the website to recognize a browser on a device belonging to an anonymous person. But now that cookie is linked to a user's login details, which includes personally identifiable information, the user and their device are no longer anonymous. Now let's look at an example of third-party cookies. Let's say that a business, let's call it Shopco, is using a publisher for online advertising, in this case Facebook. Shopco would typically allow Facebook to place its own cookies on a user's browser when they visit Shopco's website, or perhaps the user already has a cookie on their browser from Facebook. Either way, Facebook can now track the user as they browse the internet, visiting other sites embedded with tracking code, including, of course, Facebook's own sites or networks. The data gathered from multiple users can be used to build up a profile of the type of user who visits Shopco's site, which can then be used for targeted advertising. Alternatively, each specific user can be targeted with advertising as and when they visit sites either belonging to the publisher, Facebook, or in Facebook's advertising network, which is commonly referred to as remarketing or retargeting. Online publishers, especially Google and Facebook, hold huge amounts of personally identifiable information about the majority of users in Australia and elsewhere, so it's relatively simple for them to link cookie data to an identifiable person. It's generally accepted that cookies could constitute personal information if the cookie allowed a user to be reasonably identifiable. This is important because under the Australian privacy principles, an organisation needs to notify people when they collect their personal information, particularly about the purposes of that collection and who the data might be shared with. In practice, this is achieved via a pop-up notice when a user arrives at a site. The user reads the notice and gives their consent to have cookies placed on their device by clicking a button which says something like "I agree," or by simply closing the notice and continuing to use the site.